My father called me at 3 in the morning asking if I remembered where he kept his will. He was 80 years old, confused, disoriented. The dementia was getting worse. I drove to his house in my pajamas and found him sitting in the dark, crying because he couldn't remember my mother's face. My sister hadn't visited him in 5 months. My brother hadn't called in 3, but they'd both contacted his lawyer twice that week. My name is Margaret, and I'm 55 years old. My father, Robert, is 80. For the past 3 years, I've been his full-time caregiver. I quit my job as a hospital administrator, put my retirement plans on hold, moved into his guest room, because someone had to, and no one else would. My father wasn't just any father. He was Robert Harrison, the man who built Harrison Manufacturing from a small machine shop into a $42 million industrial empire. He started in 1968 with 3 employees and a dream. By 1995, he had 2 factories, 400 employees, and contracts with major automotive companies across the country. He sold the business in 2012 and retired with more wealth than 3 generations could spend, and he was the most generous man I've ever known. He believed money was meant to be shared, to build futures, to give his children and grandchildren opportunities he never had growing up poor in rural Kentucky. I'm the oldest, 55, divorced, 2 sons. Tyler is 32, a mechanical engineer in Seattle. Brandon is 29, a high school teacher in Phoenix. Good men, both doing well, both busy with their own lives. My sister Catherine is 54. She's a real estate agent, married to Paul, and they have 3 children. Amanda is 30, works in marketing. Sophia is 27, a nurse. And Jake is 24, still figuring things out, currently between jobs. Catherine lives 2 hours north in Seattle. Successful, busy, always busy. My brother David is 53. He's a corporate attorney in Portland, married to Michelle. They have twins, a boy and a girl, both 26. Oliver works in finance. Grace is a graphic designer. David's always been the golden child. Ivy League education, corner office, country club membership. Dad helped all of us build our lives. When I got divorced 20 years ago and needed a fresh start, he gave me $85,000 for a down payment on a house. No questions, no judgment, just support. When Catherine wanted to start her real estate business, he gave her $120,000 for licensing, training, and startup costs. When David wanted to open his own law practice before joining the corporate firm, Dad gave him $200,000 to cover the first year. The grandchildren got even more. Dad set up education trusts for all 7 of them, $50,000 each, invested when they were born, growing over time. By the time they turned 18, those accounts were worth between $90,000 and $130,000 each, depending on when they were born. Every single grandchild graduated college debt-free because of Robert Harrison's generosity. Tyler got his master's degree fully funded. Brandon got help buying his first home. Amanda got a car when she landed her first job. Sophia got nursing school paid for completely. Jake got $25,000 to travel Europe and find himself, which Dad thought was important. Oliver got grad school covered. Grace got her design studio equipment funded. Dad never said no. He never made anyone beg. He calculated what was fair over time and gave accordingly. He kept spreadsheets, made sure no one got significantly more than anyone else over the long term. By the time he was 75, he'd given away approximately $3.2 million to his children and grandchildren. He had detailed records, showed us once, proved everything was equitable. We all knew we were blessed. We all thanked him constantly. We all promised we'd take care of him when he got old. My mother, Linda, passed away 7 years ago. Stroke, sudden and devastating. Dad was 73 and lost without her. They'd been married 52 years, high school sweethearts. She was his everything. After she died, he started declining. Not physically at first, emotionally. The light went out of his eyes. I lived closest 45 minutes away in Tacoma. I'd visit twice a week, bring groceries, check on him, make sure he was eating. Catherine lived 2 hours north. She'd visit once a month, sometimes less. David lived an hour away in Portland, but traveled constantly for work. He'd see Dad on holidays. The grandchildren visited occasionally. Normal. Dad understood. Then 3 years ago, everything changed. Dad fell getting out of the shower, broke his hip, lay on the bathroom floor for 7 hours before his neighbor heard him calling for help. Surgery, rehabilitation, 4 months of brutal recovery. I took emergency leave from my hospital administrator job and moved in. Temporary, I thought. just until he can manage alone again. He never managed alone again. The fall triggered something, vascular dementia. The doctor said he'd probably had a series of small strokes we hadn't noticed. Now the symptoms were unmistakable: memory loss, confusion, mood swings, difficulty with basic tasks, progressive and irreversible. I called a family meeting. Catherine drove down. David came after work. We sat at Dad's kitchen table, the same table we'd eaten breakfast at as children, and discussed options. Dad needed increasing care. I couldn't do it alone while working 60-hour weeks at the hospital. I suggested we create a rotation. Each of us take 1 week per month. That way Dad always had family, and no one person bore the entire burden. Catherine said she couldn't. Her real estate business was thriving. She had showings, closings, clients depending on her. David said his caseload was impossible. He billed 300 hours a month. He couldn't just leave. I suggested we hire professional help. Dad could afford it. He had plenty of money. David said that seemed wasteful when I was already there and available. Catherine agreed. Why pay strangers when family could do it? Besides, I lived closest. It made the most sense. I was shocked. I had a career too, a demanding job, a life. But somehow, because I'd stepped up first, because I lived closer, because I was the oldest daughter, I was now the default caregiver. I asked them to at least visit regularly, share the emotional load. Dad needed more than physical care. He needed family, love, connection. They both promised weekly calls, monthly visits. We'd all stay involved. That lasted 2 months. Catherine visited 3 times in the first 2 months. Then her business got busier. Visits became every other month, then quarterly, then twice a year. David visited 4 times in 6 months. Then his firm made him partner. Suddenly he was traveling constantly, too busy for a 1-hour drive. The grandchildren stopped coming almost entirely. I quit my job after 8 months. I had to choose. I was 52 years old, walking away from a career I'd built over 25 years. But Dad needed me, and no one else was coming. Dad asked about everyone constantly. When is Catherine coming? Is David going to call? I'd make excuses. They're busy, Dad. They love you. But they didn't come. And he started to forget them anyway. The dementia progressed quickly. By year 2, Dad barely remembered. He had other children. On good days, he remembered their names. On bad days, I was the only person in his world. I was 53 years old, no job, no income, sleeping in 4-hour shifts, changing adult diapers, watching my father disappear piece by piece, alone. But Catherine and David always asked about the money. Catherine would call every few months. How's Dad's investment portfolio? Just curious about estate planning. David would email. Has Dad updated his will recently? For tax purposes. They never asked how Dad was feeling, if he'd had a good day. Just money. 18 months ago, I broke, called Catherine crying, begged her to come for just 1 weekend. I needed to visit Tyler in Seattle, needed a break before I shattered completely. Catherine said she had an open house weekend, major listings, couldn't cancel. I called David. He had a deposition, critical case. I asked both of them to split the cost of a professional weekend caregiver, $600 total, $300 each. They both said it seemed expensive, suggested I wait a few weeks. I didn't visit Tyler. I stayed with Dad, cried in the bathroom where he couldn't hear me. Year 3 brought a new crisis. Dad stopped recognizing his own house, would wake up at night trying to leave, said he needed to go home. I'd explain this was home. He'd get combative, scared. The doctor adjusted medications, said we were entering late-stage dementia. Time was running out. I called Catherine and David, told them Dad was declining rapidly. They should visit while he could still sometimes understand who they were. Catherine said she'd try to come next month. David said he'd look at his calendar. Next month came. Neither visited. Catherine had a vacation planned, Cabo, with her family. David had a conference in Miami. They had time. They had money. They chose not to come. Then 4 months ago, something shifted. Catherine called, not about Dad, about his estate lawyer. She'd contacted him, just to understand the process. She said, wanted to know if Dad had updated his will, if there were any changes. She wasn't accusing me of anything, she said. Just wanted to make sure everything was proper. I was furious. 3 years of sacrifice. 3 years of giving up my entire life. And she was implying I was manipulating Dad for inheritance. 2 weeks later, David called, Asked if Dad was still mentally competent to make legal decisions. Said he was concerned about undue influence, about people taking advantage of vulnerable elderly parents. When I asked who would take advantage, he got vague. Just making sure Dad was protected, he said. I realized what was happening. They thought I was stealing. Thought 3 years of caregiving was a con to change the will. I called Dad's estate attorney myself, Leonard Marks. He'd handled Dad's affairs for 30 years. I asked him directly. Had my siblings contacted him? He paused, then said yes. Both of them, multiple times, asking about the will. About Dad's mental state. I asked if Dad had changed anything. Leonard said no. The will was exactly as it had been for 15 years. Everything split 3 ways. Equally. Approximately $11 million per child. I asked Leonard to document everything, my caregiving, the expenses, the sacrifices, not to change anything, just to protect myself from accusations. He agreed, created a complete record. 3 months ago, Dad stopped eating. The hospice nurse said this was normal in end-stage dementia. The body shuts down. I tried everything. Nothing worked. He was dying. I called Catherine and David. This was it. Days, maybe a week. They needed to come say goodbye. Catherine said she'd come tomorrow. David said he'd drive up immediately. They both arrived the next day, together. For the first time in 2 years, they walked into Dad's bedroom, saw him, 94 pounds, barely conscious. They lasted 15 minutes. Said it was too hard, went to the living room, started discussing funeral arrangements, venue, flowers, costs. I sat with Dad, held his hand, told him I loved him, that he'd been the best father in the world, that I'd never regret these 3 years. He opened his eyes, looked directly at me, said my name clear as day. Margaret, you're a good girl. Thank you. I love you so much. Then he closed his eyes and slipped away peacefully. I was holding his hand. Catherine and David were in the other room arguing about catering options. The funeral was last week. Beautiful service. 300 people. Catherine gave a eulogy about family values. David spoke about Dad's integrity. Both cried. Both looked devastated. No one mentioned who'd been there for the last 3 years. After the service, we met with Leonard for the will reading. Everything exactly as expected. 11 million each. Catherine asked if I'd be filing any caregiver compensation claims. I said no. David asked if I'd tracked expenses. I said yes. Leonard had everything documented. Catherine asked if those expenses would reduce the estate before distribution. Leonard said yes. Standard practice. 1 submitted documentation. 3 years of legitimate expenses. Total, $163,000. Final distribution, 10.9 million each. Catherine said I'd gotten the easy part. I was there every day, got time with him. She lived with regret. I told her regret was a choice. She'd had 3 years. David said I was being unfair. They had careers, families. I told him I had a career too. I abandoned it, because someone had to. Catherine said Dad would want us to get along. I told her we weren't a family. A family shows up. David said the money was divided fairly. There was nothing to fight about. I told him he was right. The money was equal, but I got something they'd never have. I got Dad's last words, his hand in mine when he died. 3 years of moments they traded for careers and vacations. I bought a small condo with part of my inheritance. 2 bedrooms in Tacoma. I'm 55 and starting over. The therapist asked me if I resented my siblings. I told her the truth, every single day. Not for the money, for the silence, for the 3 a.m. panic attacks I had alone, for the times I held Dad while he sobbed and there was no one to hold me. She asked if I'd do it again. I said yes, without hesitation, because those 3 years gave me something Catherine and David will never understand. I knew my father completely, the way he'd hum Frank Sinatra when he couldn't remember the words, the way he'd reach for my hand in the night just to make sure someone was there. I learned what love actually means, not the easy love of birthday cards, the hard love, the kind that costs everything and gives nothing tangible except knowing you showed up when it mattered most. Catherine and David and I don't speak anymore. They think I'm bitter. They're right. I am bitter, but not about the inheritance, about being alone, about watching my father forget his own children while those children were too busy to notice. My sons understand now. Tyler calls me twice a week, says he's proud of me. Brandon visits monthly, brings dinner, listens when I need to talk. They saw what I sacrificed. They saw what their aunt and uncle didn't do. Dad knew. In his lucid moments, he'd apologize, say he was sorry I had to do this alone. I'd tell him it was okay, that I chose it, and I would choose it again, not for $11 million. For the morning he remembered my name, for his last words, "Margaret, you're a good girl." Catherine got her money, David got his, I got my father's final breath, his final thank you. 3 years of memories they'll never have. They can think they've got their fair share. I know I got everything. That's the thing about showing up. It's not about fairness or money. It's about being there when someone needs you, even when it costs everything, even when no one else will. Dad taught me that, and I'll carry it with me forever.